Good morning. We're going to get started. If you could please come and take a seat. Good morning. This first full day of our program invites us to encounter one another as persons. What are the contexts out of which we work and network? What questions are we pursuing, and why do they matter to us? Our international and regional meetings over the past 12 years have brought CTEWC into contact with a vibrant array of colleagues pursuing Catholic theological ethics in diverse regions of the world, professional settings, and communities of support. This morning, we open with a collection of senior voices in the field reflecting on these vocational questions. We turn next to emerging voices. And finally, in light of the network's core commitments, to isolated voices in the field. I will briefly introduce them all in order now, and each will present in turn from the podium. So, senior voices. Many of you will remember our first speaker from his hospitable leadership in Trento. Following doctoral work in moral theology at the Accademia Alfonsiana in Rome, Antonio Ottiero was fellow of the Foundation Alexander von Humboldt at University of Bonn. He then served as professor of moral theology at the University of Münster, where he is now emeritus professor. A member of the German Academy of Ethics and Medicine, Professor Ottiero also serves as an invaluable member of the CTEWC Planning Committee. The next speaker, as we heard last night, hosted what would become the first meeting of our Planning Committee in Leuven in 2003. Paul Schatzman is Emeritus Professor of Medical Ethics on the Faculty of Medicine at Katholieke Universiteit Leuven, and he currently serves as President of the Belgian Federal Advisory Committee on Bioethics. He has served as President of the European Association of Centers of Medical Ethics and of the Holy Spirit College, Leuven. Due to a family emergency, Paul could not be with us today, so reading his paper will be his former student, Skaria Kanial-Konil, Professor of Theological Ethics and Vice President at PVP Pontifical Oriental Institute of Religious Studies in Kerala, India. His most recent book is Bioethical Issues, A Catholic Moral Analysis. Next, our emerging voices. Sister Vimala Chenginamatam belongs to the Congregation of the Mother of Carmel, the first indigenous congregation for women in Kerala. She completed her doctorate in moral theology at the Accademia Alfonsiana in Rome and published her thesis on the psychomoral development of girls and women in dialogue with the work of Carol Gilligan. Currently, she lectures at several institutes of theology, including Jnanodaya and Dharmaram Vidyakshetram, both in Bangalore. Gustav Kovac is Professor of Philosophy, Head of the Department for Human Dignity and Social Justice, and Rector of the Theological College of Pécs in Hungary. Having studied in Australia, Austria, and Hungary, he received his doctorate from Vienna University in 2008 and completed his habilitation at University of Pécs in philosophy in 2015. His research focuses on questions of reproductive, gender, and family ethics. Margaret Sesabunya is a Ugandan postdoctoral scholar in the School of Religion, Philosophy, and Classics at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. She holds a PhD in ethics studies from the same university. Her interests include environmental ethics, leadership ethics, feminist ethics, and ethics and indigenous knowledge systems. Professor Sesabunya is one of the recipients of the CTEWC Scholarship for African Women. Finally, we hear from isolated voices. Zorica Maros also received her doctorate from the Accademia Alfonsiana, where she wrote on violent ethnic conflict and whether it is possible to speak of forgiveness as a moral obligation. She teaches here on the Catholic Theological Faculty in Sarajevo, and she's actively involved in local peace-building programs. Her first book was just released, called Violence and Ethnic Conflict, Ethics of Resistance, Responsibility, and Forgiveness. Finally, Nu Elan Tran is a medical doctor and professor of moral theology. She works at the Medical Diagnostic Center Medic in Ho Chi Minh City, and the 7 theology institutes at which she has taught include St. Joseph Major Seminary of Ho Chi Minh City Archdiocese, Jesuit St. Joseph Scholasticate, Centrum Dominicanum Studiorum, and Philip Rinaldi Salesian Don Bosco Theology Institute. So, with these voices from Germany, Italy, Belgium, India, Hungary, Uganda, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Vietnam, I give you our first plenary panel.
Morning to everyone. The question we have to ask and responded is why we are here and why we network. This question will be presented or can be presented on different levels. Because of reason of brevity, I will choose 2 aspects of this question. The first one is the level, I would call it, the level of value or a values level. We are asking why in sense of the perspectives that be open before us. Why, therefore, means in view of what? On these perspective levels, an important role is played by the visions of theological ethics that we implement, the visions with which we undertake our work. On this point, I should like to remark that the thesis, theology does not permit us to escape from the necessity of creating networks. This is not merely one option among others. The values level of our being here is connected to the very nature of theological works, which links different, plural, contextual, and cultural perspectives and visions in the importance of the dialogue. It is vitally necessary for us, as moral theologians, to overcome to the self-referentiality of our individual visions and to develop the fundamental attitude to dialogue and of openness in the theological vision of the other peoples. In the preface of the Apostolical Constitution Veritatis Gaudium, Pope Francis say, quotation, "The theologian which is satisfied with his complete and conclusive thought is mediocre. The good theologian and philosophers, as an open, that is, an incomplete thought, always open to the maius of God and of the truth, always in development." Veritatis Gaudium 3. The variety of our background, the differences of our cultural and the approach with which we articulate our ethical thinking will become riches for everyone only if we undertake the vital transition that permit the circulation of ideas and intellectual visions. If we do not create networks, we prevent the plural variety from becoming shared riches. In traditional moral theology, we elaborated for a long time under the illusion that we possessed a common language that was valid for all peoples, all persons, and all times. We believed for a long time that we lived in one world, universum, in which we could all understanding each other, even when remaining isolated from each other. In our presumption, we elevated our consensus to a category that we assumed was universal. When I think of all that, the topic of natural law, in its anthropological, foundational, and in its ethical normative aspects, as meant for our past in moral theology, I can interpret this illusion of universality only as a source of isolation and self-referentiality. The variety of approach is connatural to the content of theology, approaches that are plural, contextualized, and situated in the specificity of cultural and history, and that affect both individual subject and peoples and the different epochs of the history. This plurality does not reduce the space occupied by the ignorant. On the contrary, it opens up this space, expands it, and makes it fruitful and rich in its implications. There is no escape for this authentic cultural of encounter through a fly into abstract and meta-historical categories that we believe lie at the origin of our shared system of thought. This culture of encounter, is born and lived on the path that is oriented to what must be the deepest concern of all of us. The challenges in the time in which we live make us even more sensitive to the expectation of a greater humanitas, of a fidelity that is creative and intelligent, and of an adult and mature responsibility in view of the destiny of the world and of the history. This was my first point. The second point is an answer to the question why we have to be connected, have to be networked, in the sense of how we can do all that. This is not primarily a matter of referring on strategy, on action, programs, operational choices. Rather, I believe that it's a matter of indicating some attitude that make us capable to entering in the network and dwelling constructively in it. Let me call some of this aspect of this attitude. The author of the letter to the Hebrew, 32-36, addressing Christians in the earliest community who are undergoing trials and suffering, points out to them the importance of two fundamental virtues, namely paresia, frankness, and hyponome, constancy, perseverance. I believe this is a powerful appeal today to us. If the moral theologian is to accompany others in facing up to in time of crisis. This necessarily entails learning and speaking a language that is frank, courageous, and free from any insinuations. For theological ethics, this meant that it is important to learn and to exercise the argumentative style when founding moral judgment. Argumentative style. But this is not all. The hermeneutics of history and of life demands this fundamental liberty in looking at things and calling them by their proper name. Parrhesia, courage, does not draw up battle lines that fight against each other. Parrhesia creates bridge on which ideas and knowledge can circulate. This bridge makes it possible to recognize the reasoning of the other persons and to share the hopes that unite us. In this sense, parrhesia does not lead to isolation. It allows us to construct networks and is an indispensable attitude that helps us to take a common stance. Constancy or perseverance, hyponome, confers stability on the option that we are taking, both in individual and collective options. It is precisely in times of crisis, in crisis in leadership, that we must avoid acting on the basis of momentary improvisation. We must act on the basis of long-term decision. Long-term decision. That this long-term decision are capable of creating history, of creating a culture of life. And finally, I believe that another virtue is fundamental. If isolation is to be removed and company promoted, I would like call these virtues critical wisdom, or using the classical language, which we are familiar, prudence. The Italian philosophers Umberto Galimberti say that, quotation, philosophy is not knowledge, but an attitude. The attitude of the one who does not cease to ask questions and to call into questions all the answers that seem to be definitive. Galimberti. I believe that one must say the same about ethics, including theological ethics. In the dialectic between answer and replace, there is a short path that holds that we must make a selection. Some question must be put, while other question must be silenced. And with regard to the question that one is allowed to put, this position of the short way, the short path, the position states that the answers are always univocal, clear, stable, immutable. Let me say, if one take this page, the person one encounter are mostly solitary, isolated individuals who are the captive of their own self-referentiality and are incapable to entering into the circuit of dialogue with others. There is a second way, the long page. The long page may take a different route, the route of sensitivity to every question that is generated by life itself. This page requires that we understand the complexity and the drama of these questions. And it is able to grasp, to answer in a shared dialogue. It has the critical wisdom or the prudence that avoid setting down on the answer that have been given in the past, but is able to call them into question each time and to submit them in verification. This undertaking is not for solitary spirit, but for spirit that are open to solidarity. Why we do networks? There is many answers to this important question, but all these answers give meaning to our stay here today in Sarajevo. Thank you.
Dear friends, I am privileged to read out the paper of my professor and promoter, Paul Schwarzmans from Catholic University, Leuven, Belgium. Dear colleagues, when I received the honor in 1984 to be appointed as Professor of Medical Ethics at the Faculty of Medicine of the Catholic University of Leuven, Belgium, I, in all honesty, did not know what this really meant for me, my university and the Catholic community where I was living in. I was immediately confronted with a highly emotional debate on the legalization of abortion, invited in that contest by the Belgian King Baudouin, who later refused to sign the law, and the Belgian Senate, who was extremely hostile to every person criticizing the legal proposals at that time. In this short address, I will describe my story in 3 moments, 2 from the past and the last for the future. First, creative moral theologians. What I could not have expected, because medical ethics was a new field for me, being essentially trained in value and education and clarification. A little miracle, so I see it now, happen. I received a phone call from the United States. No one less than John Collins Harvey of Georgetown University, Francis Abel from the Barcelona Institute, asked me to join a working group on bioethical issues inside the Catholic Church. Edward Born, the Belgian Jesuit, working at the French-speaking University of Louvain, was their mediator. They made clear how important it is that moral theologians and other experts meet regularly, exchange their views and advice in a discreet way. Church leaders who are open for their opinion. No one less than Cardinal Martini of Milano and my own Cardinal Daniels supported these meetings, fortunately made possible by good willing benefactors. I may call this the red line of my professional career. Thanks to the same benefactors, we met not only in a small working group with, for example, also Patrick Verspieren from Paris, John Mahoney from the UK, Bob Zeffalo from the USA, but also in highly international and interpersonal meetings. I will never forget the meeting in Barcelona, where also non-believing participants with a great expertise were invited. In any case, I felt like a chosen son under the high protection of such creative moral theologians. We met afterwards many times at Georgetown, Milano, Maastricht, Barcelona, Brussels. A little secret that I can expose here and now. Cardinal Martini was so enthusiastic that he gave us the opportunity to attend the operas in the Scala of Milano in his private box. Of course, with the curtains closed, only to be opened when the lights were off. Second point, the start of the CTEWC. It is after these many meetings that I thought it would be an excellent idea to write a handbook or textbook on moral theology with chapters on applied ethics like bioethics, peace ethics, business ethics, etc. Presenting this idea to different benefactors, they reacted rather skeptical, if not negatively. They referred again and again to the wonderful fruits of dialogue we could experience and receive during our meetings. And so it happened. They asked Jim Keenan to invite some expert moral theologians from all continents. The wonder for me was that we could do it in the Beguinage UNESCO World Heritage of Louvain. And luckily too, the Catholic University has an outstanding hospital with more than 2,000 beds. Indeed, our initiator, Jim Keenan, had an allergic reaction and could almost not participate in the meeting. But the blessings of the Lord were with us, and through good medicine, he could again develop his magisterial skills and organization and planning. This was the moment where the Padua meeting was born. I was so lucky to be the coordinator at that time of the Erasmus Mundus Master of Bioethics with the University of Nijmegen in Holland, Leuven in Belgium, and Padua in Italy. And to know very well Renzo Peguraro, who was the great organizer at Padua. This was the meeting, the first time we could bring moral theologians from all parts of the world together. Blessed as we were there in Italy, they owned during our meeting the World Cup of Soccer, the cry during the night. This meeting was succeeded by what you know now, how Jim managed to create networks in all continents, bringing together excellent moral theologians and opening a new atmosphere of dialogue. Last point, and now the future. I turn now to my current reality and my dreams for the future. As you might know, the university hospitals of the Catholic University of both Leuphans, we have always open for the ethical integration of new medical technologies in a humanizing project. This made us integrate as the first in our country the wonderful possibilities of new reproductive technologies, the genetic revolution, and the continuous developments in medicine like organ recruitment and transplantation, palliative care, end-of-life care, etc. Our adhijim is the proportional balancing of values and disvalues in order to realize the humanly desirable, quite well knowing it is the only possible to realize the human possible. Quote from Paul Ricoeur. With my colleagues Burgrafe and Selling, all three successors to Louis Jansen's, we developed a personalist frame of reference for our highly secularized fellow citizens in our small country. I realize we stand somewhat on our own. We integrated in vitro fertilization, pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, genetic editing, organ transplantation, palliative care, and also euthanasia practices after the so-called palliative filter in our ethical frame of reference. What disturbs me at this moment is our isolated position in the Catholic world. It is therefore, in my view, time to break open the minds of the Catholic communities all over the world, to break open again the windows of our Catholic house, surely to be creative once again. Dear colleagues, the first issue of our talks in Milano was abortion for anencephalic babies. We dialogued in discretion, but gave a positive opinion in consensus to the cardinals who were ready to listen to us and to talk with us. Afterwards, we wrote what I still call a revolutionary opinion on the withdrawal of artificial nutrition and hydration for patients in vegetative state. Let us share the courage to go forward and to make our Catholic dialogue an open house for many opinions and for the integration of emerging technologies in our 21st century. Let us be co-creators with God and practice what Psalms wrote yet in his time. Lord, our Lord, When I look at your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars, which you have set in place, what's man that you are mindful of him, and the Son of Man that you care for him? Yet you crown him with glory and honor. Thank you very much.
Sister Vimala Changinamatam.
If not me, then who? If not now, then when? If not here, then where? When I was asked to speak as an emerging voice in this conference, these were the questions that arose in my heart. So here I begin the narration of a true life story. As a prelude, let me say a word about my family. I was brought up in an Indian middle-class Catholic family where we often told that the girls should keep quiet and always stay back in the house. After my final profession, superiors sent me for my studies in theology and later to pursue doctorate in moral theology from Alfonsianum, Rome. While I was preparing to go to Rome for licentiate and doctorate, one of the priests discouraged me, saying, "You may be able to complete your licentiate at Alfonsianum, but I doubt about your doctorate, because some Indian sisters have already discontinued after their licentiate from Alfonsianum." These words reverberated in my ears all throughout my studies in Rome. Moreover, it induced in me the passion not only to continue the third cycle in moral theology, but also to focus my thesis on women. Finally, in consultation with my professor, Reverend Dr. Raphael Gallagher, CSSR, dedicated to research on my psychomoral development of girls and women in the light of Carol Gilligan, a Jewish social ethicist. In the light of my research, I came out with a different understanding that moral theology can become rather contradictory if it does not develop from both genders. Gilligan has been influential in making me to think differently with a different voice, a women's voice, which need to resonate in the contemporary moral theology. Then a fundamental question arises whether our way of doing moral theology is true to what is Catholic or human. Throughout my theological journey, even though very short, I would say that these questions have stayed within me and perhaps several other Indian women theologians. Challenges I faced. Being first woman moral theologian in India, I was received heartily. In moral theological conferences, I was the only woman in the group for some years, which made me diffident to go to these conferences. But I convinced myself that even if I was not the best, being the first made me responsible. Even though I was not a so-called feminist, I made use of all the opportunity to present papers on gender ethics and other women-related issues. Sometimes I have felt that a paper on women's issues was included in such meetings just as an ornamental purposes. This may be an ambiguous guess, but I come to this conclusion from the frustrating experiences of being asked questions like, is there any difference between men and women? Why are women not responding publicly, etc.? On the other hand, I do affirm the unparalleled opportunities I was blessed with to hear Indian and international moral theologians and to receive their support. I just want to mention one of the Indian moral theologians, a pastor par excellence, Reverend Dr. Clement Campos, CSSR, who succeeded in understanding the voiceless voice and audibilized it in eloquent words. All this encouraged me to do moral theology in my own context of religious formation of novices and junior sisters. When I was the directress of the Center of Theological Formation of Sisters belonging to different congregations, I could enhance their self-respect and ignite the multitasking capacity to inherent in them. Those years opened up excellent opportunities for me to connect with sisters from various congregations and to spread awareness about the real situation of religious sisters in India. I try to inculcate in the young religious love and respect for one's own womanhood and sexuality and to be at home with oneself. To some extent, I could instigate in them the vigor to think their feminine genius and thus help them to reflect differently than to fit into the age-old frames or methodologies formed by men. Networking. I could see that I had started to network even when I was just a student at Alfonsianum because I encouraged and promoted several sisters from different congregations in India to do their licentiate and doctorate in moral theology there. I was privileged to be invited to participate in the Trend Conference organized by CTEWC in 2010. There I found CTEWC programs supported and encouraged women in the ethical field. At that conference, one of the papers which I felt had moved all the audiences with its vibrancy and musical eloquence was by Julie Cloak on Gender and Moral Theology, a Love Story. Julie Cloak courageously spoke about what was happening in the global ethical arena by being gender sensitive in its thinking and argumentation. After the struggles and hurdles for accepting women as they are, I could experience the same change in the Indian moral theological arena with the presence of increasing women ethicists. Further, I was empowered to speak defensively and ask questions with fervor on behalf of all women in a meeting hosted by Department of Moral Theology of Dharmara Vidya Kshetram in July 2012 at Bangalore, India. There I was asked to present a paper on gender perspectives in India. I presented the paper with the usual hesitance with which I am culturally formed. When I spoke out the truth about women, there were purposeful questions on women's issues by men, embedded only with head and without heart. In that workshop, I met two different great personalities, Reverend Dr. James Keenan, S.J., and Reverend Dr. Lucas Chan, S.J. Soon after my paper, Professor Keenan asked me, Vimala, did you notice some of your brother's style of asking questions? Was it not ridiculing? Yes. There I heard the voice of my heart resonating from his mouth and heart. By being the part of audience, Professor Keenan understood the pulse of how men hear a woman speaking about gender justice. My simple conversation with Professor Keenan was strengthening and encouraging to have confidence in me. That encounter opened the way to participate and present paper in Asian Regional Conference by CTEWC in July 2015 at Dharma Vidya Kshetram, Bangalore. In that history, but a brilliant example of how to ethicize, she is Kantamal's valiant Hindu woman Satyabhama Naik, who helped, nourished, protected, and hired many religious sisters in her tribal shelter during the terrifying violence against Christians in 2007 in Orissa. In this regard, she had to suffer a lot, even from her own people. Did this woman genius, from her natural instinct, behave like a prompt ethicist? Does her respect for human beings stand above the caste and belief system? Sometimes we, the so-called ethicists, I would say, after all these conferences and five-star discussions, miss to make such a daring step to fulfill the demands of the needy and the suffering. I would say the moral theological ethicists must go a second mile in our theologizing journey to reach out and tackle ethical problems like internal and external violence against girls and women, human trafficking, sexual objectification, etc. It's always true that successful people can help others. It would be great to speak about the opportunities I received to meet Reverend Dr. Lisa Cahill, who is always an inspiring woman in her ways of ethicizing. Our casual meetings and encourages me when she came to Bangalore, India for her lectures. It's great to say about her because whenever she comes to India for giving lectures, she mostly refers Indian women who made their impact in various fields of development in India. That inspired me to educate India through her own daughters. It's also worth to mention an eminent moral theologian from India, Reverend Dr. Shaji Kuchitara CMI, who was ready to share and assist me in connecting to international network of people, as I have mentioned above. He also inspired me to present papers in various conferences and to write articles. I continue to network with an intrinsic, irresistible urge to do something with regard to girls and women. I'm always willing to take it up with a compelling force and to follow my conscience to speak, write, and act on behalf of women standing within my limitations. Pope Francis, in the new apostolic exhortation, Gaudete et Exsultate, speaks about the call to holiness. I quote, "We have to realize what the word is, the message of Jesus that God wants to speak to the world by your life." Number 24. Therefore, I realize that Jesus' message that God wants to speak to the world through my life is the promotion and defense of women's genius, thereby propagating an integral vision of what it means to be human. I am grateful to the Almighty for all the opportunities He bestowed upon me and obliged to yield according to the measure given unto me. It's high time that we evaluate the contributions of the deeply compelling vision of ethicists of the world churches to the society and to the world at large. Today, we see a vital example before us in Professor Jim Keenan SJ and his team, who could connect the world ethicists here in Sarajevo. It shows the width of worldwide heart and their efforts to assure the kingdom. CTEWC has always made history through open, effective, and frequent communication. Let the respect and the dignity we experience through this networking must be a mandate to be practiced in our countries. Dear brothers and sisters, as a single body, it's our collective responsibility to spread qualities of love, justice, respect, equality, peace, and forgiveness. Let us strive together to build His kingdom here on earth. Thank you. Thank you all.
Gustav Kovac.
Ladies and gentlemen, as mentioned, I'm a theologian from Hungary, and I consider networking as one of the central part of my job. So I would like to share some of my experiences about what networking meant for me, what it meant for my institution, the Theological College of Page, what it meant for my students, my colleagues, and our social environment. It's going to be a rather personal account. So in the next 15 minutes, I'm going to talk about three things I think networking is about. It's about reaching beyond borders, seizing the moment, and digging up talents. Accordingly, I will tell you 3 symbolic stories from my own experience of networking. First, about a burst green balloon. Second, about an accidental encounter in Vienna. And third, about a 140 centimeter tall Roma girl from Hungary. So let me start with the burst green balloon and about reaching beyond borders. I was born and raised in CTEWC, which is a small town near the Austrian border, and it used to be a bilingual city before the Second World War. Everyone could speak Hungarian and German both. But after the war, people stopped speaking the latter because they were afraid of being tagged as German war criminals, and they were afraid of being deported. So I grew up in a family with Austrian and Hungarian origins both, but only Hungarian was spoken there. There were actually 2 exceptions. Prayers and swear words were pronounced in German. So we lived just 2 kilometers away from the Austrian border, but we could never cross it as a family since the authorities were afraid that we would immigrate to the free world. So what my family thought was that I would grow up in the happiest barack of the Soviet bloc, possibly crossing the border only once each 3 years to spend the $70 Hungarian citizens visiting a Western country could exchange by the grace of the Hungarian People's Republic. Bright future, isn't it? But this narrow vision changed on a cold February day in 1989. I was 9 years old back then, when my mom came home from her workplace with a burst green balloon in her hand. Now, I'm sure you are asking yourself why a mom would return home with a burst green balloon to his son. But it was a special balloon because it had a small piece of paper tied to it saying, "I'm Luisa Weissenbeck. I live in St. Lorenzen am Wechsel, Austria. I'm 11 years old, and I would like to have a pen pal." So the message was in German, and my grandmother could understand it. So I took pen and paper and asked my grandmother to help me write a letter to this girl. We became pen pals for about a decade or so, and I spent my most beautiful summer holidays at this beautiful village in the Austrian Alps. So why did I tell you this story? Because it's symbolic not just for my own biography, but for the biographies of many Central Europeans who experienced the fall of communism and the opening of the borders between the eastern and the western parts of Europe. This green balloon flew 80 kilometers over the Iron Curtain, ignoring the borders, ignoring the barbed wires, and landed burst on a pile of wood and waited just for me to respond to the calling. So I considered this as my first experience with networking. Although it was only us 2 who were officially pen pals, it motivated almost every member of our families, from the youngest to the oldest, and prompted numerous encounters. People on both sides experienced that there was something new going on here, and everyone was willing to get involved. This is what I see as the prerequisite of all networking. A network needs brave and open people who are willing to invite others to cooperate and who are ready to give a positive response to the calling. It was not just the balloon who crossed the border, but Luisa and me and our families who made this brave step over the border in our hearts. Since 1989, I had a lot of opportunities of networking beyond the borders of Hungary, but this marvelous story was always in my head when I had the chance to connect with other people. I'm not a very brave and confident person by character, but this unexpected event and what followed up helped me later to seize every moment when I had the chance to connect. This is the story which makes a difference when I get an invitation to join an academic organization or to come to a conference. Many of my colleagues back at home look at conference invitations and see only the titles of lectures. They often just read the topics and simply forget about it. Some of them simply stopped going to conferences saying, I already know what they are going to say there. This is sad because what they don't read enough carefully is that there are also coffee breaks and lunch breaks. But for me, these breaks are not just times of eating and drinking, but moments on finding burst green balloons with a message on them to connect. I remember a few great presentations from conferences, but I remember even more encounters with great people whose name was sometimes not even on the conference flyer. I remember some great concepts from presentations, but I remember even more great ideas from conversations during lunch or coffee breaks. So most people at conferences want simply to survive the breaks and sit safe and comfortable in their chairs in the lecture hall. Instead, we should rather walk around with an open mind and spirit to connect with others. These are the times for seizing the moment. I myself made two of my most important encounters on the way to the bathroom. Both times I stopped and made contacts lasting for years and making a great influence on my progress. So in 2009, I went to the retirement ceremony of Professor Zuliner in Vienna, when I met my dear good friend Slavomir Dlugoš from Vienna University. He grabbed my arms, pulled me into his office, and literally made me participate in the Association of Bioethicists in Central Europe. I don't think back then he had an exact and detailed plan. It seemed that he just wanted to get a bunch of moral theologians to Vienna and see what happens. But now I see that he had a vision of getting into conversation with Central European bioethicists, of moral theologians listening to each other, of motivating theologians to work, think, and dream together. Theologians who had been working in isolation before. This vision has yielded not just 10 international conferences so far, not just a great number of publications, academic projects, student exchanges, and summer schools, but also true and lasting friendships among members. And these friendships prove to be the glue of the whole organization. For me, these friendships are the proof that seizing the moment is a key element in networking. Friendships are not planned. They happen and evolve by seizing the moment. We go to a conference with a well-planned presentation, but we hardly go there with a strategic plan to make friends. We also don't make friends with a specific purpose. And any network, including our network here, needs to go beyond a specific purpose, needs to go beyond specific plans if it wants to last. This conference here gives us the chance not just to build up or to expand the network, but also to produce the glue which makes it lasting. And finally, after the green balloon and my unexpected encounter with Slavomir in Vienna, I would like to talk about how networks can have an impact beyond their official boundaries and help digging up talents. I want to tell you the story of a 21-year-old Roma girl from a village in southern Hungary. Juliet is the size of 140 centimeters, about 4'7". When she was born, no one thought that she would make it to study at a college. Coming from a village with almost 100% unemployment and extremely high criminal rates, her chances to study at a college were just about the same as playing at 4'7" for the Boston Celtics of the NBA. But she made it to our college, and this spring I took her to a summer school in Opole in Poland. For Juliet, this was the first time of being abroad and spending time in an English-speaking environment. The summer school was organized by my good friend Piotr Mocinec, who is great at motivating people. So what happened there came totally unexpected. This girl from this poor village turned out to be a great communicator in English. She was one of the most active in connecting with students from other countries and made presentations which left us both breathless and laughing. This 4'7" girl turned out to be a giant in communication. These 5 days of summer school enabled both her and all other participants to recognize a talent which was hidden by social barriers. And this is also what a good network can and supposed to do. It can reach beyond its official boundaries, help people to seize the moment, and dig up hidden talents. It can send a green balloon with a message. It can grab one's arms and can bring hidden potentials to light. So these three stories are uniquely Central European, being set in a Central European context and history. But they all have a relevance for our network here. Catholic Theological Ethics in the World Church is an organization and a network which has been sending green balloons with messages for more than a decade now. We have people here who seized the moment and gave a positive answer to the message carried by the balloons. And our activities have yielded numerous similar stories to that of Juliet, and in my view, these are the greatest achievements of our network. And now we are here in Sarajevo, and what we do with the network does not depend on some great plan, but it is rather on us what we do with this opportunity. We joined Jim's great vision of bringing people together here in the city with a history of connecting different religions and cultures. He sent his green balloon. Now it is upon us to seize the moment and to dig up the hidden potentials of the network. I'm convinced that everyone here can contribute to the network and is happy to do so. So use your coffee breaks, reach beyond your borders, seize the moment, and let those hidden potentials of our network come to light. Thank you for your attention.
Margaret Sasabunya.
Thank you very much. When I received an email from Christine requesting me to speak at the first plenary of this conference under the Emerging Voices, I was startled. I developed feelings of inadequacy, and I wondered as to whether I would ably execute the task at hand. Nevertheless, I accepted the opportunity with the hope that by sharing my story as an emerging theologian and listening to the stories of others, especially the senior voices and the isolated voices, I will be enriched and inspired even the more in my work as an academic and as an advocate for the empowerment of women and the girl child in rural Uganda. In this presentation, I give my vocational biography, particularly how, as an emerging voice, I have networked and why such networking makes a difference in the work that I do. I also talk about what it means to me to come into theological ethics as a lay woman from rural Uganda, pointing out how CTEWC has supported me and made a difference in my connectedness. My journey to becoming a theologian started way back in 2009 when I was awarded the CTEWC scholarship for the Advanced training of African women in theological ethics. The scholarship aimed at providing opportunities for African women to undertake and complete their academic, professional, and basic training in moral theology, social ethics, and theological ethics. Before being awarded the scholarship, my desire was to undertake advanced training in human rights advocacy. Having grown up in a community where rights of women and girls were daily violated, I thought I needed to do something for my community, and yet this wasn't possible because I didn't have funding. So when I received the CTEWC scholarship, I felt like, wow, this was my time to shine. And I was very happy about the opportunity because I knew I was going to live my dream. However, shortly after receiving the scholarship, fears started creeping in. Two questions kept ringing in my head. What was I to do with theology? Since I wasn't a priest, I wasn't a religious, and I was not aspiring to join the convent. How was moral theology related to the kind of work that I wanted to do? By then, I didn't know what theological ethics meant, and I didn't know what even moral theology was all about. I had never been exposed to theological studies and work. My thinking then, and this is still the thinking of very many people in Uganda, where I come from, that theology is for priests and for nuns. So it had nothing to do with me as a laywoman. My fears increased even the more when I got to know that out of the 7 women who had been granted the CTEWC scholarship, I was the only lay woman, the rest being nuns. How was I to interact with them, given the fact that we live in different worlds altogether? However, my fears were all conquered after the various mentoring sessions that CTEWC organized for us from time to time. And today, I confidently affirm that I am a theologian. CTEWC has supported and made a difference in my connectedness in several ways. To begin with, it has helped enhance my professional competence in ethics through offering me a scholarship in advanced training at both master's and doctorate level. And throughout the duration of my study, as a CTEWC beneficiary, mentoring sessions were undertaken, and during these sessions, I was able to meet with a number of senior voices and theologians to discuss progress as well as the challenges encountered in my academic journey and work. CTEWC has also organized conferences both at international and regional level that I've been part of. Through the Trento 2010, the Nairobi 2012, and this particular one, Sarajevo 2018, I've been able to meet and engage with a number of senior voices, many of whom I used to read around in books. And it is through interactions with some of the female senior voices that I managed to enroll into the circle of concerned African women theologians. The circle's main goal is to investigate African women theologies and to record and publish research in this regard. It addresses issues of African women's liberation, both in the church and in society. It is about how we as women can support fellow women. Besides CTEWC and the Circle, I'm also a member of the Globe Ethics Network, a global network of persons and institutions interested in various fields of applied ethics. These networks have opened for me a platform to engage with other ethicists and theologians from various backgrounds, especially feminists and environmentalists. And they have also helped to further reinforce my theological identity. My current work is majorly in academia and advocacy for women empowerment. I'm currently a postdoctoral scholar at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, where I also have an opportunity to facilitate lectures in environmental ethics and other applied ethics modules. I'm passionate about teaching ethics. It gives me great joy when I interact and engage students on critical moral challenges of our times. Many students have come to appreciate the role of ethics in countering the trend of moral degeneration in our society today. A number of students have come to realize that they have a great role to play in bringing about the desired change within the communities. And secondly, I'm involved in advocacy for women empowerment. As an advocate for women empowerment, I'm deeply conscious of the need for women and girls to find meaning in what happens to them, in the way they live their lives. I believe in extending compassion, care, and support to women and girls, and to ensure sustainable presence in the local community. And it is for this reason that a colleague and I started a community-based organization. It's called Women and Girl Child Empowerment Initiative. We started it in my village. We envision a society where women and girls are empowered to realize their full potential. We realize that while Uganda has made strides in promoting and advancing women and girls, there is still a number of challenges affecting us as women. Women and girls continue to be victims of violence in all its forms: inequality, poverty, unemployment, and poor health. And of recent, there have been a number of murders of women throughout the country. And so within our CBO, our main target is mainly the women and girls both in school and out of school. And the girls in school, we are looking at those in upper primary and secondary school, because these girls encounter a period of great emotional, physical, and psychological challenges that require societal support, lack of which very many of them drop out of school. We want to keep girls in school. We want to see girls advance. And we believe education can help them advance to greater heights. And so we are trying to ensure that we support and help the girls keep in school. And we are also targeting women in our CBO for three major reasons. One, the girls need to feel the support of women within the community. So my team and I are training women on how to provide ideal support structures for the girls within the community. Mothers, aunties, and grandmothers are usually the first points of reference that the girls go to in case of anything. And so we felt we need to bring them on board to support the girls to stay in school. And secondly, women in my village are greatly affected by poverty. And so also very many of the girls who drop out of school find themselves in the same cycle. And third, we also believe the empowerment of women is likely to promote their independence, health, and welfare. So we are doing quite a number of activities, and at the moment we are engaged in mentoring and providing career guidance to the girls in schools, also providing sanitary facilities to the girls. We are going to start engaging in research and development so that we can also contribute to influencing policy with regard to women and girls. In conclusion, Scripture and Christian tradition affirm to the relational character of human flourishing and human goodness, as well as the moral responsibility of human beings to promote the interests of those who do not have access to systems upon which such flourishing depends. To me, engaging with the girls and women in my village is a kairos moment, a moment of opportunity not to be lost, a moment to live up to the theological virtues of faith, hope, and charity, a moment characterized with new ways of thinking, working, and relating to others in order to empower them and constantly remind them of the love of Christ for them. I'm driven by the fact that we are all equally loved by God, and that it is through us as God's children that this love is lived and acted out. Through my work, I have realized that one doesn't have to have a lot to give out, but it is through the small things that we do for the least members in society. We can daily live out our Christianity through those small things that we do for others. If we want to see change within our communities, let us build bridges and let us become the starting point for that change. I strongly believe that we must not forget to listen to the voices of the underprivileged, especially the voices of women and girls. Thank you very much.
Zorica Maros.
Before I start, I need to say that for me it's almost surreal to see so many people at one place. I am happy and honored to be a part of this, even if I am now a little scared. And I survived the war. Thank you. So, I was asked to say something about my academic life and about my experience with CTEWC. So, with my presentation, at the very beginning, I would like to briefly introduce myself. Then I will offer some information about the conferences organized by CTEWC. And I will conclude with the metaphorical explanation of the importance and symbolism of the bridges in comparison to the mission work of ethicists, at least as I see it. So, my first personal academic steps are best described as pioneering in confusion. I was a part of the first generation of students where laypersons were allowed to study theology. We were the first post-war generation of lay students. Naturally, much of that was confusing both to us and to the professors themselves. In the last year of my philosophical theological study, I was told that my professors sought a scholarship from Cardinal Vinko Pulic so that I could continue my postgraduate studies, and that scholarship was approved. So in 2004, without a big plan but with a great enthusiasm, I went to Rome and enrolled in moral theology postgraduate studies at Accademia Alfonsiana. After graduating as a Master of Science, I enrolled in doctoral studies And before I finished them, I was invited to give lectures here at our faculty. So at academic year of 2010-2011, I began to teach a moral theology. I was then the only woman, the only female professor at the faculty. And again, it was still quite confusing for both me and for my colleagues. I got my PhD in 2013, and I became the first woman from our faculty who got her PhD from theology, specifically moral theology. I am still the only woman in the country who teaches moral theology and the first female chair of the Cathedra of Moral Theology. Thank you. There were challenges, and there still are, but in them I see possibility to expand our freedom and thus our personality. So I understand challenges as a task that need to be completed and not as a situation to endure. And it was this challenge, this task, and this expansion of freedom and personality that I experienced each time I gathered with CTEWC. The same year I completed my doctorate in 2013. For the first time, I encountered the network of ethicists at a meeting in Berlin. In fact, this was also my very first conference. And again, it was quite confusing because not only I did not know the aim or the purpose of those conferences, but above all, I almost did not understand anything going on the conference because back then I didn't speak English at all, nor did I ever learn it at school. Despite my very poor English, or perhaps because of it, I was invited to the following year's conference in 2014 in Krakow. While the first conference in Berlin emphasized the ambition and the need to create a stronger continental connection among ethicists, the second conference in Krakow clarified the goal of this network. This conference in Krakow, entitled Faith and Morals, Contemporary Challenges, Reorientation of Values, Change of Moral Norms, highlighted the need of further relationship in Europe by addressing together the institutional and personal challenges theological ethicists face in teaching, mentoring, and research as a member of the Church and the academy. Consequently, the Krakow conference highlighted the need to link the ethicists of Western and Eastern Europe to discuss global issue locally and to settle local issue with a global perspective. And it is worth emphasizing the extraordinary meeting held also in Berlin in 2017, entitled Academic Training Program, How to Participate as Theologian in the Public Debate. Those were exceptionally worthwhile study days for the chosen number of ethicists whose focus was on the demand, the need, and the way to communicate faith in the contemporary world. This gathering brought together a selected number of ethicists who discussed not only the mission of the Church to enter into the public space, but also the new challenges in bioethics, public narratives, human rights issues, cooperation with NGOs and international organizations, and so on. In brief, the common conclusion of those meetings was the idea to reduce the geographical and cultural distance between ethicists on one side and the common good on the other. Namely, although the physical symbols of a divided Europe are many years behind us, and despite the fact that the Church of the Second Vatican Council is global, the world and the Church itself continue to be divided by invisible but no less insurmountable walls. Therefore, divisions still exist, and because of them, we must continue to work to bring the church and the theologian together to mutually achieve a dimension of cohesion in a global world. During all those meetings, the need for the ethicists to come out from their small and closed environments was confirmed while discussing contemporary challenges from each regional perspective. My environment can also be characterized as small and closed as well. Isolation from the general discussion regarding not only global but also local problems, the inability to communicate one's own idea or to debate about others, thus creates a great wall of isolation. In the meantime, in order to minimize those walls somehow, I myself organized 3 international conferences at our faculty here on topic of violence, justice, and forgiveness from 2014 to 2017, on which I have invited, among other great people, some of the great people I met at these conferences organized by CTEWC. My guests were therefore Jim Keenan, Antonia Utiero, Marianne Heimbach-Steins, Christine Heyer, Linda Hogan, Stanislavino Zetvaria, Steve Pope, and so on. I connected my faculty with all of them, as well as with many others. In addition to the latter, Jim invited me last year, 2017, to a fellowship exchange in Boston, where I spent 4 months gaining valuable knowledge. So personally, this relationship did not just result in leaving the small and closed environments and introducing to other people, but also in providing me with a great intellectual wealth. Since our relationship led to the idea to organize this conference here in Sarajevo, the benefit of the link, I would say, is not only local, but also it is global one, as witnessed by your presence here and now. Since I see ethics as scientific disciplines that does not explain much about the world itself, but rather about what would the world should and could be like, I see ethics, morals, according to the general title of this conference, exactly as a bridge that connects the world as it is in reality with the world that it might be. The basic symbolism of the bridge is the best part. Sorry. Okay. Is that just okay? Okay, sorry and thank you. So, the basic symbolism of the bridges refers actually to the connection itself. It could be connection of one reality with another, the present world and the desired one. The bridge, therefore, symbolically connects visible with invisible, known with unknown, as well as different people and situations. The bridge is the main motive for our Nobel Prize winner in literature, Ivo Andrić. For Andrić, bridges are more important than houses, more holy than temples, because they serve to all equally. They are always meaningfully constructed, they are more durable than other buildings, and they are the place where the greatest number of human needs mutually cross. Other buildings, houses, churches, institutions, they stand independently. They do not need to connect to other side to fulfill purpose of their existence. Bridges are a symbol of human victory over the forces of nature. The obstacles that nature sets up for the human are difficult, but people overcome them with the bridges. That is how the bridge represents the triumph of human genius over an abyss, a torrent, a river, or any other obstacle. Just one paragraph. Okay. The fundamental means of such interconnection among people is the dialogue that accomplishes intellectual, moral, and cultural dimension of community, community. Sincere dialogue is not just a method of thinking, but also becomes a way of living for the common good of society. Ethics is a construction, just like a bridge, which needs another shore to fulfill the purpose of its existence. Ethics, just like a bridge, is a symbol of human victory over the forces of nature, a bridge that connects the real present world to the one it might be, or perhaps should be. It is from this perspective that I observe the realization of such community with these meetings, this effort and this commitment of CTEWC, a community that makes us more mature because such bridges reduce the social, psychological, moral and cultural isolation and distance between people. All for the purpose the world as it could be. Even if such a vision of the world in present circumstances may not be feasible, I am the opinion that we should at least spiritually strive to what is physically impossible to achieve. Perhaps with all this said, this is the one of the possible answers to the question in the title of today's block of lectures, Why We Network. And here in the end, I would like to use this opportunity to greet all of you, to wish you a warm welcome into our country, and to thank CTEWC for everything that they have done and for everything they are doing. Thank you. Sorry. Thank you.
Elan Chan.
My dear professors, colleagues, and friends, I would like to tell my own story of doing more theology in Vietnam. I have been a medical doctor for 5 years before entering my congregation. Truly, during my medical training, I never thought of becoming a religious. I was always in the top 10 of my 380 medical classmates and dreamed to have a happy marriage and become a talented doctor to devote my life to poor patients. However, facing death day by day in practicing medical work, I have longed for God's eternity and decided to enter religious life. After finishing basic theology program, I was asked by my superior to go to the Philippines for further theology study. With my medical background, I chose to study more theology so as I would combine both in my future work. At first, I just wanted to finish theology study in Manila, then back to Vietnam to continue my medical work. It was Father James Kinan, my great professor, who taught me courses of fundamental moral theology and bioethics in Manila, inspired me for further study in moral theology after finishing STL in Manila. I received my doctorate in moral theology in 2006 from Western Jesuit School of Theology in the US and became Vietnam's first Catholic woman moral theologian up to this day. Thank you. Thank you. Up to this day, I'm still the only Catholic woman moral theologian who has doctorate in moral theology among some other priests in the Vietnam Church. In 2007, the invitation for me to teach in the Vietnamese Jesuit Scholasticate was historic. The then director told me, "This is the first time in Vietnamese Jesuit tradition that a woman professor enters our institute to teach Jesuits. This privilege is truly a breaking ground for a shift in the Vietnamese church regarding the teaching role of women. There seems to be a pressure as well as efforts on the part of the Vietnamese church to involve more women in major seminary teaching. In 2014, I was honored to be the first woman professor at St. Joseph Major Seminary of Ho Chi Minh Archdiocese in its 150-year history. Seminarians have welcomed me warmly, expressed their gratitude to my teaching, and the joy of having a cool wind in their formation. I have also taught in the other theologies such as the Dominican, Salesian Don Bosco, Franciscan, the Lausanne Theology Institute, and the Pontifical Theology Institute, which is the first theology institute of Vietnam since 1975, after the union of the country can give STL diploma. These theologies receive students from different religious congregations. My students also consider me as their mother, sister, and friend. I have experienced that the students appreciate my professional competence as well as my feminine characteristics of caring, generosity, and tenderness. During the study in the US, I experienced my professors' loving devotion for their students. In my turn, I devote my life for students following the examples of my professors, first and foremost, Father Jim Kinnan, the American Jesuit to whom I owe my today's success as a valuable female moral theologian in Vietnam. My passionate contribution to the church is an expression of my gratitude towards God, my parents, professors, benefactors, and my congregation. Moreover, I'm the only woman theologian member of Committee for the Doctrine of the Faith in Vietnam, headed by a bishop, directly under the Catholic Bishops' Conference of Vietnam. Along with medical work and theology teaching, I collaborate with the bi-monthly journal Communion, an official journal of the Bishops' Conference of Vietnam. Some bishops get to know me. These bishops, a great number of priests and Catholic believers, express their confidence in the logic, clarity, and convincing arguments of my medical, bioethical, and sexual writings, based on scientific facts and theological reasoning. Admittedly, I have just fulfilled the task of explaining church teachings and not yet shed new light in doing more theology. The newness of my reasoning is that, besides the forefronts of modern theology, I rely on scientific facts and experience of medical work. However, a large number of Vietnamese priests still harbor the patriarchal mindset. I often remind my students that priesthood is a free gift from God, and as the example of our Savior, Jesus Christ, leader positions must be understood as to serve, not to be served, and that priests should respect and listen to women's voice. In the Vietnam context, with the dictatorship of the communist government, the moral theologians' activities have been limited within the church, parish, and theology institutes. What the moral theologian could do in the meantime is prudently raise public awareness of human dignity and human rights. On my part, I'm under pressure in the church community to teach faithfully with the magisterium's teaching. but I also try to speculate on specific issues in a dialogical way to find convincing rational arguments in facing with other positions. I search knowledge from human sciences. Surely, scientific knowledge provides just the understanding about human and human acting. Then, on the basis of theological methodology, the moralist rather assesses what is good for human as an individual, for the humanity, and for the whole creatures. Today, Vietnamese Catholics, especially the youth, require that the Church and moral theologians are to talk to them with a comprehensible language, the language of reason, science, conscience, and experience. To me, the terminology of virtues, of humanity, authentic human flourishment may build up a bridge between Catholicism and other people. Ecological crisis is a big problem in Vietnam today. Having talked about ecological ethics to students, religious in other congregations, I evoke in them the love for the country, the dignity of human life, the virtue of treasuring lives of creatures. Those are the common virtues for all Vietnamese disregarding religions and political positions. Another task that I'm doing now is education on sexuality for the youth and teenagers in some parishes. Despite the existence of traditional moral values regarding on sexuality, there is growing concern toward premarital sex among youth and teenagers in Vietnam. The youth acquisition of knowledge of sexual issues is limited. Parents still keep silence on this issue in the families. The program of sex education in school simply focuses on safe sex, public health, and other interests of the state. In this situation, some of my students who are priests and working in parishes invite me to give some talks on sexual education for the youth and teenagers. It is a challenge for me to find out the vocabularies and knowledge on sexuality in both medical and moral perspectives that are in harmony with the age of this audience. Another issue is that the youth today live online. I'm unlearning to use social media as a way to speak into the world. Admittedly, I simply use internet to acquire knowledge, have communion with the whole church through information, and do personal research. Thanks to Father Jim Kinnan and his teamwork, I have had a chance to involve in CTEWC since 2006, the first meeting in Padua. I have learned many things from CTEWC and its organizers. I have chances to get to know many talented moral theologians in the world, and this gives me an inspiration to continue the work of moral theologians in Vietnam, where moral theology has not yet developed much. From the example of my professors and his colleagues, I have tried to do research periodically as a requirement for a theologian besides my medical work and theology teaching. In Vietnam, most professors of theology do teaching work and rarely do research because they are overwhelmed with teaching tasks. The less they do research, the more difficult for them to take courage to start doing research. What's more, I learned from the organizers of CTEWC's devotion, warm and effective help for others concerning on the interrelated growth of moral theology and of young moral theologians, and quite a well organization for such a big conference. I see the work of CTEWC as an example for the responsibilities and characteristics of moral theologians in a today networking world. The activities of CTEWC give me a sense that we All modern theologians are members of the same family. Few words of conclusion. In Vietnam, there are growing fears and anxiety for the future of the country under the government of the Communist Party and the invasion of Chinese Communist government. What I may accompany my people is to remind them to remember that we have the God who is love, omnipotent, provident, and has already overcome death, and who will stand by our side and for human true flourishment. As a modern theologian, I should work for harmony and dialogue to sow the seeds of hope, peace, and joy, and to build up the bridge of forgiveness, of dialogue, and harmony. Thank you very much for your attention.
I want to thank you all. I want to thank you for your insights about doing theology in a relational key in different networked ways. I want to thank you for sharing your personal narratives, your vocational journeys, many of them, as we heard, pioneering narratives. And I want to thank you for helping us imagine different ways we can cross borders, whether by building bridges or sending up balloons. I also want to thank them for their discipline in speaking for 15 minutes or fewer. They've set an excellent example for our subsequent plenaries. Subsequent plenaries throughout the weekend will have time for an open forum, but our idea actually, in terms of Gustav's suggestion, was today to have you all continue the conversation and seize the moment at the coffee break, which will begin in a moment. I hope you're able to listen to and share similar stories directly with one another there. A few announcements before we do that. First, as you know, later today, beginning at noon, we will have 2 poster sessions. Thank you to many, many of you who came yesterday and mounted your posters upstairs in the auditorium. A special thanks to those who assisted. If you arrived late and would like to mount your poster before noon, we have left supplies 1 floor up above us in the auditorium. We ask if you are in poster session A, you mount on a red sticker. If you are in poster session B, you mount on a blue sticker. In a moment, I will invite you to our coffee break. All of our coffee breaks and lunches will be served in the back under the pagodas there, the connected tents. But I would like to ask you to be mindful that we will return here and begin at 11:15 so that we can extend what we have just heard. We would like to incorporate in a service of remembrance the narratives of those among us who have gone before us. So again, please join me in thanking all of our first plenary speakers.